Phew, which brings us breathlessly, and there's already a queue coming into the Q&A, it's probably when will I finish, to our two guests. I'm going to ask Nina to introduce Kelly, because Kelly's work is new to me, but all I pick up from the research that I've done is just how amazing her work is in the area of well-being and emotional health. But I'll start with Nina, introduce her. So Nina's been an associate for independent thinking a long time. She's associate director. She's right at the heart of what independent thinking does. She's an expert in so many ways around creativity and teaching and learning and technology and special educational needs. But also what has really come to the fore in the last few years is her work around well-being and emotional health and she's got so many of her own experiences to draw on, and she's such a source of strength to so many people around this country, around the world, when it comes to emotional health and well-being. And she regularly gets standing ovations when we used to be allowed into halls and big rooms talking about emotional health. I've seen her talk about it in Hong Kong, in the UK, or in Chile, all over the place. So she's the main person to speak to, and I'm so delighted that she's here to talk about emotional health and well-being in all that's going on. So that's me bigging you up, Nina. Big Kelly up, and then come back to me, and we'll launch.
First of all, can I say, wow, I'm not sure I'm the person that you're actually speaking about, but if this is being recorded, I'm going to have that on my gravestone, because that's just absolutely well, tidy, lush, like in it. I'm really delighted to bring along a very, very special guest this afternoon, who is Kelly, and she is at Mind Work Matters. And Kelly and I have connected for a very, very long time on social media, but we've never actually met in person, have we, Kelly?
No, we haven't.
We've talked on the phone and we've connected via social media, and there was just this, you know, sometimes you meet people and you think, really? Really? And there was this strand and a connection with Kelly because A, of her impact in what she does in her school and schools, B, as the person that she is, that makes kindness and humanity and people the centre of everything, which right now and forevermore should be what we look at with regards to enlightening and enhancing people. And Kelly's work with Optimus Education as well, who we have a partnership with through independent thinking, and just the whole plethora of things that you do, Kelly, is quite stunning. So I guess if right now, because I could celebrate so much about you and your work, if you could celebrate 3 amazing things, okay, about you, because as teachers, with emotional health and well-being, I don't think we're very good at that, aren't we? No. You know, we're really brilliant at saying to children, oh, you know, tell us some great things that you've done today, but we're not good at doing it ourselves. We're not necessarily good at self-care and self-compassion. So over to you, Kelly. 3 amazing things about you and your impact.
So thank you, Nina, for that amazing introduction, very heartfelt, and I really am appreciative of the alignment of our work. Even though we haven't met, I feel like I've spiritually met you through social media, so thank you for being you. 3 amazing things about me is, one, that everything that I do places well-being at the heart of people. So people are at the centre of any decision-making processes that I make within education to help people flourish from adversity. The second thing about me is that I'm a people person, and I love being around people and learning from them. And I mostly always see the best in people. And I think that's a real quality to have, and I'm a very loyal person as well. And thirdly, I am incredibly hardworking for important causes that align with my visions and values. So if you were someone who was bringing me into your school as a consultant, you would get the best of me, not the rest of me.
Absolutely. And you know, just by the way that Ian there positioned us, Ian gave an introduction about me, and suddenly I thought to myself, oh gosh, isn't that really lovely? And why didn't I then, as a human being, embrace that and say, thanks, that's spot on? Because we're genuinely, I think, more in the education profession as well, we're not necessarily very good at taking compliments or actually celebrating ourselves, which is so crucial and central as part of well-being and emotional health. So me then throwing it over to you, asking you for you to celebrate you in 3 things. What I initiated then, thank you for doing that, was, okay, how is she gonna cope under this pressure now? Am I gonna make her feel anxious, or am I going to allow Kelly to really think, okay, what am I all about? Because isn't that right now what we're trying to do to make people feel emotionally healthy? And thank you for being so honest and celebrating you, because that is true. So there's 2 sides of that coin, isn't there, really? And Ian, if we throw it back to you and asked you to celebrate 3 things about you now, I've got a feeling you're probably going to do the Nessa on me and say, back off.
Yeah, back off.
Yeah.
What's interesting, he says, swerving that one, is part of me is going, oh, this is too gushing, we're just too much in love with ourselves, and people will think, oh, you just been. But actually, it's exactly what you say. It's the extent to which we are able to celebrate ourselves. And when somebody gives us a compliment, that we say, thank you very much. And I remember I used to talk about this with teachers a long time ago. I remember Barbara Streisand, I think it was, being given a comment about her nails. This is what stayed in my head. And rather than, oh, no, these, she went, oh, thank you very much. And then I look at, in the UK especially, and you just, as soon as somebody says, I really love the way you do that. Oh, yeah, no, well, and we do it down. And we need to be able to, as part of our emotional health and well-being, to celebrate ourselves when we're given a compliment, and also to be able to compliment ourselves in a way that isn't, oh, you're big-headed, you're blowing your own trumpet, you're being gushing. And so we're in the area of self-care. I want to come back to that. But also there's a phrase that you used, which I find myself using increasingly when I'm speaking to people and in emails, as so much of it is now. Thank you for being you. And that says even more than thank you for doing that nice bit of work, thank you for staying after school. It's just thank you for being, because everything that you are, everything that you bring is important to me, not just the things you do that please me. Thank you just for being you. I think that's an incredible thing to say. So I'm glad we dive straight in with that, and thank you both for being you. And I thank me for being me too. Let me ask you about, before we get into the current and the future, there's been a lot of talk about emotional health crisis in our schools, in our classrooms. And so many of us and so many of the attendees will be aware of issues around the children, the young people that we're working with. But what about the staff room? What, in your experience, both of you, to what extent is it true that there has been an emotional health crisis in our staff rooms? Kelly?
Yeah, I think for many reasons that is happening. I think we have the separation and the fragmentation of people. So some people are key workers and are actually going into work. Some people may be going into that space feeling quite anxious. Some people will be delighted to be there to gain a sense of some form of normality. But on the other side of the coin, we have our people who are shielding and having to stay at home. So something that I've noticed that's quite prevalent is people identifying where they sit within the cogs of the working clock, and whether they've got a sense of value and purpose. That's something that people have been struggling with. I know in the beginning I found it incredibly hard to connect to my sense of purpose, because I'm someone who likes to have that face-to-face contact. I'm a very intuitive person, so I like to read the people that I'm working with, and I in-tune myself to them. And I think what the biggest challenge is the connectivity factor and the relationship factor as well, because that's what we're missing. And all the time we can connect on Zoom, we can create virtual staff rooms, but it's not the same as them water cooler moments when you're in the staff room and you just have the general chat. It's the moment to moment interactions, them non-verbal interactions where someone will smile at you and it can totally lift your day. Or on the other side, if you're having a bad day, it's someone to go to and offload. So I think isolation for me is the biggest indicator of poor mental health. And I think people are feeling isolated and carrying what I call stinking thinking, overthinking, overanalyzing, and making incredibly harsh judgments on ourselves. And I thank Nina and yourself for bringing up that, you know, the topics around imposter syndrome. When Nina initially asked me to say 3 good things about myself, I did find that incredibly daunting, because I'm someone who's like a compliment queen. I love giving compliments to people, and it often is random strangers. I just pick up on energies, and I think sometimes you just have to help someone feel a bit better and point out their, you know, the positivities about them, because as human beings we're really rubbish at identifying how wonderful we are. We're often telling ourselves that we need to be better, we need to establish our strengths more, but actually just getting through and getting up every day and getting dressed and being prepared for the day tells me that you are incredible human beings, because this is such an unusual, surreal situation that we're in, and it's currently going to get more challenging, I think, as we reintegrate back to school.
The thinking. I love that phrase. I stumbled across something on Twitter yesterday, and it was somebody saying that they're asking, did other people have the same thing? Their head teacher had called them into their office, socially distanced, to speak to them, and they spent the whole of it, they spoke for about 10 minutes or so, asking how that person, what the head teacher was asking how that person was, and in the person's mind it was, something bad's going to happen, the head teacher's going to tell me off, I've done something wrong, and you look at the Twitter thread, and everybody was saying, yeah, one of the SLT rang me the other day, and I was waiting for them to tell me off, tell me something was wrong, but they were just checking in and asking how I was. So the stinking thinking is, even when people are trying to be positive and supportive and nice, it gets undermined because of the stinking thinking. What sort of advice would you give people to counteract the stinking thinking?
I think to be kind to yourself, and to connect with the things that you do really well. We do suffer with them imposter thoughts that tell us that if we're going to say something, we're going to look silly, and we tend to steer towards catastrophizing. So I think it's looking at a situation and taking yourself out of it emotionally, taking the emotional content out and looking in and saying to yourself, if I was to advise someone, if I had a colleague in my team, what advice would I be giving to them? What compassion would I be giving to them? And I think we need to get better at doing that to ourselves and just letting go of beating ourselves up internally, because as human beings we tend to do that quite a lot.
Yeah, and we're quite brilliant at that, because in many ways right now there'll be so many teachers and practitioners who will be really concerned about what's ahead. But if we go back a bit, just before COVID, then to be fair, there has been, and it's grown, a massive issue with regards to emotional well-being in school for teachers, okay? The way the system is, and the workload and the amount of accountability on individuals is massive. I mean, I would argue that teachers are super beings, because not only are they marking, teaching, assessing, caring, contacting parents, trying to look after themselves, but often so many practicing teachers, and this is where they reach out and they call and they just say, I don't know how to leave the trauma that I'm experiencing. I feel as if I'm experiencing it with the other children, the children who are coming to me because I make them feel safe. These are teachers who are brilliant at what they do. You know, the children are telling me things, so I'm now in the area of safeguarding as well. I feel as if I'm going home and I just can't release the worry, the stress, the problem. So what I call them are these mille-feuille layers of well-being. I mean, a mille-feuille pastry, it's just absolutely lush, isn't it? But the mille-feuille of well-being is horrific, you know, because we're in a situation now where teachers are more than what they have ever been. And if you're an attendee in this group right now, I just want to, honestly, I'm wrapping my arms virtually around you and giving you a Welsh touch and thanking you for what you do. So we've had stress, anxiety, some serious, massive issues to do with depression. In many of the conferences that I've done, the head teachers saying, well, you know, we've got to look after our teachers, but actually there's not many people that are actually looking after ourselves. And the problems being then is leadership with heart, and problems in well-being in those teams as well. So ultimately, we've already had a mental and emotional health crisis in our schools before this. Now we've got two strands running, okay? I do hope that aspects of COVID has given some of our teachers some time to breathe, okay? However, where some aspects of time may be on their hands, you've then got the added pressure of the online training, the online teaching, things that are new, still actually the marking, the assessment, the accountability, checking in. And I'm just pleading with you as teachers out there, will you just press the pause remote and either say, right now, I'm not able to do this for you because I have to address this over here. And it's that power of no. Now, where are you with that, Kelly, in your schools? Because you must be experiencing that as well.
Yeah, when I initially was brought into the school, that was 4 years ago, and the school had been graded by Ofsted, placed in special measures by Ofsted. So when I initially went into the school was a broken community. The parents were mistrusting towards the teachers. They felt that they were failing their children. Children's behaviour was off the wall. We had school leaders who were really struggling to contain that environment. And I remember very clearly, I can remember it sitting here now, walking into that community and thinking, it's quite simple. All I need to do is work on the relationship factor of this school to bring trust, autonomy and creativity back into this environment. And that needs to begin with an honest conversation. So what I welcomed was people sharing their viewpoints, but also creating a space for them to be able to come up with solution-focused approaches around that. So what would you do? What are your ideas? And I think if you go to people and you offer them a space to share, a safe container to share their thoughts and thinking around the education system, what you do is you open up a powerful conversation, and in turn that releases the stigma around talking about mental health. Because let's be honest, most problems that educators are facing are closely correlated with mental health. So if we look beyond the problem, if we look at the behaviour symptom, what sits under that is an underlying unmet mental health need. And I think as educators, for me, it was a systemic approach where every stakeholder within my school community was valued and had a voice and was part of that decision-making process to build strategies, action plans. Everybody played their part. And what that does is that builds a sense of unity and ownership. So when I'm not in the school setting, when I'm out consulting or presenting, I know everything still carries on because there's a legacy, a continued service of work that I initially embedded, and everyone has their roles and responsibility in that. But I think the biggest thing, if I'm talking to you educators out there watching this, it's to be responsible and take accountability for your own mental health and well-being. Self-care has never been so important. Us workers, I call us wellbeing workers, light workers in education, we are absolutely ridiculous at looking after ourselves. We tend to not get enough sleep. We often overeat or undereat. We tend to feel like we're superhuman, that we have this power. And someone's even said to me before, how can you have a wobble? You're the wellbeing leader. And I said, no, I'm actually a human being before I'm the wellbeing leader. So we need to take a stand, and the foundation of any work that we do should be on ourselves.
And we've got to put kindness. We've got to put kindness for ourselves back into schools, not just for children, but for teachers as well. And tying that in with things like, staff rooms, safe spaces, okay? That power for you actually to put that do not disturb sign on your door to say, I'm all peopled out, go away, or whatever your phrase needs to be. I'd like this afternoon for us to give more strength and more support to teachers to actually say, no, enough is enough. With self-care and self-compassion at its heart. but also for senior leaders as well, and the whole community, so that when we go back to whatever the system will be, because it will be hard, we're going to have even more traumas to actually face. Should we just stop chatting amongst ourselves now, Ian, and let you just sort of come back in a bit?
Well, yeah, good. Breathe, both of you. No, it's brilliant. It's good stuff. I'm just looking at the questions. We've got an anonymous question, and I think you're sort of addressing it. They're saying the other side, and the original, a first question came in about staff rooms, so I want to go back to there. But the question about the other side of the scale about isolation is where there's so much stuff going on directly in, like we're all in your homes now. So your home was your safe space, where apart from maybe your marking or your planning, school didn't get in, but now it's in there. And they're saying, planning online learning, marking multiple meetings, contact by hundreds of teenagers, directives, they're all into your home. And the question is, maybe there's a sense of resentment building. How can we address these different experiences? But I think one of the big things you're saying with regard to that is that you have an honest conversation whereby the ability to say no and hang the do not disturb sign or the do not interrupt or the out of office for however long it is the back off one. Is important that you have that honest conversation. I know there are certain schools I email and it says, you can email me in the middle of the night, but I'm not going to reply. Or I might email you in the middle of the night, but I do not expect a reply until working hours tomorrow. So what honest conversations can you have, given that we're all up to this point of crisis anyway, before anyway, let alone now, that you have the honest conversation that says, that is where saying no is okay. I think that's one of the things that's coming through. Just going back to, and feel free if you want to add to that in just a minute, but just the question about any ideas for small crowded staff rooms that can support positive well-being when there's no budget given to deal with that we can't have small and crowded going back. That's a question from the East Coast of Canada, which is surprising about small and crowded because it's wide and open, but I know exactly what they mean. So Kelly, any thoughts? What staff room, physical space, staff room spaces, plans do you have?
I can really relate to that. We have the most awful staff room in our school. It's tiny, it's not fit for purpose. But what we've done is created an environment that's become welcoming with little or no budget. And I think what's important is to bring the staff room into other spaces. It isn't just a physical room, it's about creating that staff room environment at other opportunities. So part of the wellbeing prescriptions that I have for staff, we have a wellbeing notice board within the staff room, and it's interactive, so staff can share their ideas and their thoughts. And there's also lots of support services within that as well, and shout outs to staff, good things noticed. But it's about giving a space to build on relationships. So it may be some extracurricular activities outside of school. And those teachers who are watching now thinking, well, how do I have the time for that? I think it's about the school systems and operations that are in your school. So we have a no marking policy. We have a different planning. We don't submit plans. Plans are done in groups. They're done collectively with phases. And what that's done, that's released the workload, but built different relationships, so pockets of relationships. And you can have an outside staff room as well. It doesn't have to be inside. And even if it's in the winter, there's nothing wrong with wrapping up warm. Just imagine what it would look like if we were still practicing social distancing in school throughout the next year. What would that look like and how would it feel? And what would make that a more pleasurable experience? And I think they're the questions that you need to be sending out in free questionnaires to your staff, and work from where they are and be respectful that everyone's own personal experience is very different and unique to them.
Okay, the no marking thing is interesting. One of our associates is Julie Rees, who's a head teacher of a primary school in Ledbury. Deals with a lot of issues around sort of rural poverty and challenges in that sort of way. It's a values-based school, and they do all sorts of things. But one of the things they introduced a couple of years ago was a no written marking policy. And apart from all the benefits that brought in terms of teacher well-being and freeing up teacher time, she said their SAT results, and they weren't doing it for the SAT results, but their SAT results went through the roof. So this thing where I started about there being another way, we have to mark in order to get the results. No, by not marking, we can get the results. And another associate, Mark Creasy, who's a year 3 teacher, he's speaking to us tomorrow around resilient learners and independent learners. I asked him about how he approaches marking, and he says he just works with his children to teach them the whole process of how to go about evaluating their own and each other's work. And they do that. They do the marking. And he might spend the first week when he gets a new class at the beginning of the year taking them through that, but it saves so much time. He says that ultimately any marking that he does is just writing on children's books, I agree. So by coming at this idea about what are the things that are really draining our time, and by draining our time, they're draining us physically and emotionally as well, that we can find out how to just get rid of and come at it in a different way. And again, if you go back to this, there is always another way. Just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean to say we always have to do it that way. Things like outside classrooms. You know, we've spent the idea of sitting under a tree as our classroom, let alone our staff room. We can do these things if we just shift our perception from this is what a school looks like, this is how it has to be. And I think that shift has been forced upon us through what's happened, and we can hang on to that creativity that all teachers have to be able to think, well, how can it be different? Nina, do you want to add anything around that and the saying no bit?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, really, this is how closely aligned that both Kelly and I are, where Kelly has spoken about wellbeing prescriptions, and we've talked about this ourselves, but part of something that I do myself and with independent thinking is we look at this mind medicine prescription, where you literally think about, which is all part of the self-care and self-compassion, what can I do for myself first? Because that's what you're supposed to do, isn't it? You know, you don't necessarily book an appointment with a GP or anything now. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to think about, well, I'll go to the pharmacy first and I'll see what they've got there that can help me to get better. And that's very much the same with either the wellbeing prescription or the mind medicine prescription that we call. Think about, first of all, and this is you as teacher practitioners, what can you and also what should you, right, take the risk of doing for yourself first before you then need to ask for extra help, or that sort of visit, shall we say, to the GP, or the visit to another colleague and say, look, I'm really struggling with this. You know, what can I do about it? I've tried this. It's not working for me. I've put the do not disturb sign on. I'm going to bed earlier. I've upped my gin intake from 10 to 14, and that's still not working. And I'm now on 6 bottles of wine. But also, and the gratitude board isn't working for me. I feel restricted, I feel pressurized, and it's coming back to this power of connectedness and networking. Because even this discussion now, as soon as one person says something, what's going on in another person's head is, oh yeah, I'll come in with a little bit of that now, you've got me thinking. And that connectedness with regards to well-being, and just even saying, you know, how are you feeling today? That's not a word, that's a sign. And people will pick up on that. Or, how are you feeling today? Shit. Which which actually sums up so many things.
Okay-ish. That was one you were talking about the other day, wasn't it?
The okay-ish. I mean, what do we mean by the word okay? Because generally people will say, you know, how are you feeling? Yeah, I'm okay. Or okay, or okay-ish. I mean, what does okay-ish actually mean for the individual? Which is coming back to, I really need people, not just from my own experience, but so many other people I've connected, to go back to recognizing what are your magical ingredients, and, you know, celebrate them secretly if you really need to. You don't have to do them to the world, but celebrate your brilliant, unique, magical ingredients first, and then think, do you know what, I really can't do this, and have the strength to say to people, thank you, I know you think I'm obviously brilliant to take on this board, but right now, this job, but right now I've got an appointment with myself, or I'm going to a meeting. Now, meetings are the word meeting is the most powerful word ever, because if you say to somebody, oh, I can't, I'm in a meeting, how likely are you to say to that person, cancel it, I'm far more important? You're not, because people generally don't get disturbed in meetings. So you say, oh, sorry, I can't do that there because my time is taken up, I'm in a meeting. Because what you're doing actually is you're meeting with yourself. You're actually putting.
I like that. You can't spell meeting without the word me. I like that.
Oh, exactly.
There's two, and also things like patting yourself, literally patting yourself on the back. We know that physically it has similar implications, neurologically, physiologically, from being patted on the back by somebody else, and the same with the hugging.
Yeah.
Hugging, we know neurologically has a positive effect.
It's the same thing when you put your palms of your hands actually on the side of your cheeks like that. It really feels as if somebody else, because if you do it to yourself, if everybody did it right now, I wish I could see you all. Kelly, come on, you got to join in. So if you do this, do they feel like your own hands, or if you're doing it really gently, just touching, do they feel like somebody else is keeping you safe? The answer is yes. Okay.
I feel like somebody else's.
Yes. Yeah.
Two questions that have come up, which are sort of similar, really. I'll bounce these to Kelly. Miriam's asking about the person in the staff room who's a bit of a martyr, who tells everyone to look after themselves, but doesn't really look after themselves. And then sort of linked to that, it's leadership teams who aren't really modelling the idea of being emotionally healthy. So the head teacher sometimes, and I've seen them, who they're always the first one in, they're always the last one to leave. There's a whole 5 o'clock club out there of people sort of supporting each other for getting up so early, and I'm sure there's good reasons for it, but are they modelling self-care in a positive way too? And I'm also aware that I'm thinking about other things that I've said to teachers over the years, that the head teacher, the boss, is one of the most significant people in your life, especially if it's your first job. So if you're modelling this idea about your job is your life, and not your life has a job in it, but your job is your life, you're sending this message that unless you're working really hard and so coming back to me now, I think it's an apocryphal story of a guy who died at his desk, but nobody noticed for 3 days. And it was the reason why, according to this story, is he was always the first one in and the last one to leave. So people would come into work, oh, Joe's at his desk, and people would head out, oh, Joe's still at his desk, Joe works hard, and Joe was dead. So when I'm working with head teachers, I'm saying, would your staff notice if you were dead? I didn't say care, but notice is important. Always in, always there. How can you encourage those people of significant position, whatever that might be, to adopt this idea of self-care? Kelly?
It's that, saying work to live, not live to work. And so often teachers are living through their work, and they're having a tiny proportion of their life to actually live their life. It's that homework-life balancing. And I think from my experience, it always has to come from the top, and you have to be the role model of the culture that you want to see and the temperature that you want to set for your organisation, whether that's in education or a business. So if you are the leader who is working ridiculous hours, you're going to have members of staff who want to live up to that expectation that you put upon yourself. So the first question that you can ask yourself is that expectation that you're putting on yourself realistic? And so often leaders tell me it's not. They expect to be that person who is role modelling that they're doing more than anyone else. We're all human beings. We all need the same, well, some of us need different amounts of sleep, but we all need a quality amount of sleep. We need to practice self-care. So I think for leaders, it's really important to role model across the school. My head teacher is absolutely amazing. So she demonstrates to us the importance of self-care. This week, the school was closed, and this is the first holiday that we've had through the pandemic. So we've worked through bank holidays and through the last half term. But what my leader said was, no, we can't function. We can't come back on the 1st and continue this level of work when we're depleted. So she's really good at recognising them pinch points throughout the year. And I think it's looking at it pragmatically and looking at the school year. Where are the areas where your staff are going to be really busy? Is it SATs week? Is it when they're writing reports? And just to go back to what you were saying earlier about some of us may be feeling actually that our workload has increased in the pandemic because we're setting this unrealistic expectation that we need to be completely trained up in a new area of career development because we feel that we need to use this time. But what if you were able to use this time just to connect to yourself and notice your triggers and look at what your symptoms of stress are? And I think that's a powerful tool, but it needs to come from the top. and leaders need to role model what they want to see, the change they want to be.
And in terms of the benefits the leaders will see by doing that, what's in it for them? So there's going to be less staff illness, greater staff retention. What's the direct impact of a healthy staff in the classroom, your experience?
Less absences, definitely, and we know that to be true in our school. And holding on to your teacher retention. We had 50% of staff who were long-term supply. We now have all of our staff, and our teachers don't leave. They could work a mile up the road and earn an extra £4,000. They choose to stay because they know their well-being is full turf.
Yeah, there is research from the world, office work, business work, if you like, that by working hard, the longer hours, the less productive you are. You actually be more productive with fewer hours. And I think it's sort of getting those messages across where we've got this Protestant work ethic, whatever you want to call it, where the harder you work, the better you are. And it's just, it's working smarter, not harder. And there's all those sorts of things in there as well. Nina, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to put a little bit of a spanner in there, actually, because first of all, can I just say there are no trophies or medals left in the cabinet for anybody that works 18, 20 hours, which some people do, and then need to say it. But I remember speaking to a group of teachers in a school who said to me, I come in really early to school. And the reason I come in really early to school is actually that's my quiet time to be able to plan, mark and get myself ready for the day, because you've got no idea, it's like hectic where my apartment is. And I stay as late as I can, because actually when nobody's around, the school building is my safety and my quiet zone to do X, Y and Z. When I go home, I ain't doing nothing. Okay, I'm not doing anything. And it was very interesting, you know, when we're looking geographically at where some teachers live, where they work, and, you know, there's people don't necessarily live in houses, they live in apartments or whatever. Number one, please make the right choice for you, okay? However, you are not going to get a certificate with glitter on it if you feel that you have to be in school to show somebody, oh yes, I've been here since 7 o'clock this morning, just for the sake of it. You choosing the right options is going to give you the best type of thinking mind. Your well-being is going to be tip-top. You're going to be brilliant in the classroom, and actually maybe even saying to somebody, this is what I choose for myself as part of my teacher self-care and self-compassion. I need to be in school for these times, and then it's hey-ho, when I go home, I don't do anything. If we're also coming back to sort of the thing about the staff room and preparedness for whatever the change will be, I'm going to go back to this whole thing of, will you just tell your story, okay? Tell your story, actually, of you, the experiences that you've had, like as if when you come back from a summer holidays. I hope that this has given people the strength to be even more honest than they have ever done before, because so many of our colleagues have either lost their lives or have become really close to it. And now, when you have trauma, you get this this gift. I've called it a gift, a punched gift. It gives you the chance to be able to be far more honest about things that you may never have said before. For example, no, I'm not happy about the fact that actually that sink there in the staff room is completely filthy and it's not good for my well-being. So if you're not going to do it, I'll do it. Those things that maybe you've never said or done before, but connectedness, kindness and humanity has to be number one for all aspects of well-being in an emotionally healthy school, in whatever now or the future brings.
So stories, and this has come through in a few of the conversations, or a number of the conversations we've had, where Howell Roberts was talking about it, Dave Keeling was just talking about it, Jim Roberson, in terms of motivation and engagement, that everybody's going to come back with these amazing, however you define that, awful, terrible, exciting, interesting stories. So time for people just to connect through stories, which we've been doing for thousands of years, that's the starting point. There's no need to plan anything apart from we're just going to sit and we're going to tell our stories of how things have been. And that creates that sense of connectedness, which is what is at the heart of an emotionally healthy school.
This will basically create the roadmap for where you need to go. But you know what? These stories are going to be stories of survival. How I survived being in isolation, how I survived not seeing my children or my grandparents, how I survived, and let's not get away from this, how I have survived losing a loved one, which ties brilliantly into your session tomorrow.
Yeah.
These will be stories of survival, but they will be stories of success within humanity, well-being and emotional health, for children, leaders, for everybody. So can we please start our learning with the stories of survival?
And honesty, that's a phrase that's come through, and I'll come back to Kelly on this. Stigma and honesty, two things that conflict. When there's a sense of stigma around mental health and talking about it generally, talking about other people's close to you, talking about your own, then it means you can't be honest. And what I've seen is when you can't be honest, it makes it worse, because then you get all senses of shame and resentment and self-hate kick in. So the more honest we are, the more we can fight stigma. Kelly, do you feel that what we've got now looking forward is an opportunity, because we've all gone through something awful together, that we can now be honest about it, and that honesty is going to contribute towards breaking down stigma around mental health? Kelly?
Yeah, I think I call it post-traumatic growth. So I think we've got an opportunity to create a space where people can dump the old normal and come into this new normal with a sense of honesty and transparency and authenticity. There's nothing wrong with admitting that you've had a hard time in lockdown. And like Nina was saying, sharing the narrative around your lockdown experience is a very powerful tool for that post-traumatic growth, because you're identified with the things that you found challenging. So for me, it was not being physically connected to people, but then realising halfway through lockdown that that's okay, because I can be emotionally connected to people without being physically close to them. So it's taking that story and actually creating your own ending. And that does start with learning to build the scaffolding, the perimeters around what is acceptable for you. So looking clearly at what are your expectations for yourself, because so often we tend to layer the pressure, and then when we've achieved something as human beings, and especially teachers that I work with, they ask, what next? But what about if you can just pause, take a breath? Practice simple things like learning to connect with your body, because there is that correlation. How many teachers have gut problems? And we know the gut is in correspondence to our brain. So our brain may be coping okay, but we may be suffering with symptoms of burnout, and that may play itself out by having IBS symptoms. So I think it's just having an honest conversation with yourself and then sharing, but checking in with your intention to share. And I always do that. When as a public speaker, my story is a story that has elements of sadness in it. It's related to childhood trauma and adverse childhood experiences. However, the underlying message within my story is that positivity of flipping a narrative on something that's happened and turning it into a positive. And I think that we have a real clear opportunity to do this within education. What do we want to keep and what do we want to leave behind?
Yeah, the storytelling as well, and what you just said, and I've seen it with Nina so often. Nina, you tell your stories, and it gives permission for others to give their story in maybe the first time ever. So is this an opportunity for that sense of openness?
Yes, and I do believe sometimes that once you have that strength to really tell your honest, truthful story, that can somehow give somebody else the permission to finally be free. And those connected chapters of stories from other human beings that just say, I've been carrying this around for like 35 years. And for the first time, you've given me permission to be okay with my real story. And far too often in education, we're scared of being honest, because we don't want to upset the line manager, we don't want to upset the head teacher. But shall I tell you one thing, what I've learned in these 55 years, oh sorry, I'm only 6.5, of being on this planet, is that actually, when you are honest, the amount of respect that you get, even if other people don't really want to hear it, but if you're genuinely honest and you have integrity, master powers, and you gain this free self-esteem and self-confidence.
Honesty and integrity. It's interesting looking at what's going on in the news currently in the UK. When I tweeted about this earlier, when an organisation's values are saying loyalty is our top, and when an individual's values are saying integrity and honesty at top, you're going to have a conflict, and that's what you're seeing now in the governing party in England, in the UK at the moment. This conflict between loyalty and honesty and integrity.
Yeah. Please do watch Kay Burley's interview with Michael Gove earlier today. Oh, that woman, she's cracked it. Guys, get on it. It's absolutely brilliant. No, yes, give me an answer. No, she wants the truth.
So values are at the heart of so much of what we're doing. So we've got 5 minutes, and I want to nail something that will be vexing so many teachers, and it comes from the government. The idea that we've got to close the gap. Especially for children from poorer socio-economic backgrounds, as if there wasn't a gap before. We've got to have schools back in. Look at how many kids aren't doing online learning, therefore they're feral, they're running wild. When they come back in because of that, we need to be firm with discipline and with behaviour. We need to get them ready, and the centre of every school is behaviour. So we need to. So there are these pressures coming from on high, into schools, saying that is our priority going back. So I want a sentence or a bit from both of you, and we've got 4 minutes left. What is your advice from a well-being point of view in terms of the teachers and the children in response to those sorts of pressures? Kelly, I'll come to you first.
I think start off with your staff, because if you've got staff that are not mentally prepared to welcome them children back, they're not going to be able to meet the needs that are coming through the school gates. And let's be honest, there will be needs of trauma related issues. And I think it's absolutely vital to know where you're going, to map out that recovery journey. So have a recovery programme and check in along the way so people know where they're heading to. Give them a vision of what that may look like, but also allow for some diversion along the way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, thank you. Nina, what's your response to the close the gap, bring them in, sit them down?
That's all I'm going to say is, teachers, head teachers, leaders, please make the right choices for your community, for all children, for all staff, and for yourselves, for now and the future, and be prepared to take risks, but put relationships, kindness, and connectivity at the heart of everything that you do. For what you do now will lay the path to a greater future of emotionally healthy schools.
Wow, yeah. We had an independent thinking sort of associate conversation, a private one, a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that came through from many of the people who are teachers as well as associates was this idea, what do we want the adults in the next 15 years to look like? Because what we do now in schools going back will determine the sorts of adults we get, and we could end up with adults who maybe we have caught up and they've got some qualifications, but they're traumatized, they're damaged, they're hurt, they're angry, they're unheard, they're all sorts of other, or maybe there are those with fewer qualifications, who knows, but who are emotionally healthy and resilient to deal with the next crisis. And this pandemic is nothing compared to climate change and all the other things that are coming our way. So if we're not emotionally healthy, we're nowhere really. We've got 2 minutes. One last sentence. So Kelly, looking back, if we go 10 years time and we look back and we think, yeah, it took a crisis, but at least this happened, this changed in schools. What would you want to see change, Kelly?
I'd want all education systems to place well-being at the heart of education. We need to start from where people are. When our children come back into school, they're going to have different experiences. Likewise, our staff will. And we need to make sure that we connect and align our values to our school communities. All of the educators that are watching this, you know your communities best. Yes, listen to the government guidelines, but also stick to the autonomy of your own school's journey. And I think that's really important. And looking back, what I'd like to see is that we have really resilient coronavirus communities that have flourished from this experiences and put well-being first before learning, because it looks after the learning if you do, I promise you that.
Yeah, put the well-being first and the learning, the results, the grades, the salary. Nina, from a country, principality that has put emotional well-being before the opening of schools, one last thing to add in 20 seconds?
Well-being is a work of heart, teaching is a work of heart, leadership is a work of heart and head together, boom shakala, you got it.
There we go. Boom shakala is about. Thank you, Kelly and Nina. That's been wonderful. Thank you all the attendees, all the questions. I did a lot of chat going on. If you want to carry on the conversation, at ITL Worldwide on Twitter. If there are any questions you want me to field, Ian at independentthinking.co.uk, I'll pass them on. Check out the website, certainly find out more about our work, Nina's work, independentthinking.com. Independentthinkingpress.com is where you'll find all the Independent Thinking books. At the moment, they're 30% off with CPD30 code, or 50% off if you want the ebooks using the code VAT50, because the government's got rid of that on ebooks, which means we can finally let them out cheaper. So have a look at all of that. Remember the 4 charities, NHS Relief Project, Winston's Wish, Big Issue, RSPB, check them out, send some money their ways, it will be well spent. Thank you, Kelly and Nina, thank you all the attendees. I'm going for a lie down, and keep safe, and yeah, connections and mental health, put that right at the heart, everything else will follow from there. Okay, thank you very much.